This is a bit awkward, isn't it? Good afternoon. Can everybody in this room see my shoes? For those of you at the back that can't, I have to admit they're the most ostentatious and over-the-top shoes you can imagine. And I bought them almost 6 years ago to the day with my first pay packet when I started work as a solicitor in London. But looking at them now, they're in better condition today than they were the day they were taken off that shelf and placed on my feet for me. And you're going to find out exactly why that is. Now, by way of background, I am a mouth painting artist. I achieved history for somebody with my level of disability when completing the New York Marathon. I was an Olympic torchbearer in 2012. And I received an OBE later that year for services to charity. But it hasn't always been that way. Now, looking back, I think I had a fairly ordinary childhood, brought up by two loving parents. At school, I saw myself very much as an all-rounder. I was fairly academic, but I had a great love and passion for sport. I played cricket for my school, football for my school and county. I was a qualified scuba diver. I had a great love for rugby. I played rugby for my school, my town, my county, my region. I toured Australia and New Zealand at the age of 16, and just a few months before my 17th birthday, I was signed to play semi-professionally for the London Broncos Rugby League Academy side. But all of that changed on the 4th of April, 2004. Now, on the 4th of April, I was playing my very first match for the Broncos Academy, away versus Halifax in Yorkshire. Now, the match kicked off, and looking back, I remember consciously thinking to myself that my dream of one day becoming a professional rugby player had just become one step closer. But it was just 20 seconds into that match, as I went into my first tackle of the match, as I had hundreds, and if not thousands of times before, was going up playing the game, that something went terribly wrong. I've since been told that as I went into that tackle, one of my own teammates came in to help me. But as he did so, his knee struck me in the side of my neck and broke it instantly. Now, lying on the pitch, I can't explain how, but I knew what I'd done. I knew I'd broken my neck. The paramedics were asking me to move my toes. I couldn't. The physiotherapists asking if I could feel them touch my hands. I couldn't. There were visions of Christopher Reeve flooding my mind, the prospect of a future life as a disabled person confined to a wheelchair was inescapable. As I lay on the pitch that day, contemplating my future, the last thing I remember before I stopped breathing and fell unconscious was simply pleading with the paramedics to let me die. But they didn't. I was airlifted from the pitch to the neuro-intensive care unit in Leeds General Infirmary, where I was kept in an induced coma for 2 days. During that period, it was unclear whether I had sustained brain damage due to oxygen deprivation on the pitch. But what was clear from the scans and the x-rays was that I'd suffered a dislocation of the 3rd and the 4th vertebra of my spinal column. And the prospect that if and when I was to awake that I'd be severely disabled was already clear. Now, after 2 days, the decision was taken to wake me. The doctors had to determine whether I had sustained brain damage. Now, at that time, I was intubated and therefore couldn't speak. I could move no part of my body below my neck, and I was heavily sedated. And so I remember being told that if I understood what was being said to me, I should simply blink my eyes once. Do you know who you are? One blink. Do you know what your name is? One blink. Do you know where you are? One blink. Do you know what I'm about to say to you? One blink. I didn't need to be told that I broke my neck, that my chances of survival were unclear, that I'd never again voluntarily move any part of my body below my neck, and that the life that I'd lived, loved, enjoyed, but ultimately taken for granted for the first 17 years and 15 days of my life was over. I already knew. And my recollection of my time in Leeds is extremely vague. I was heavily sedated and extremely poorly. However, I do remember the nightmares, those horrific dreams in which I could no longer move. In that first split second, when I awoke, that's all it was, a nightmare. And then reality hit. Now, what followed were 9 months spent recovering in 3 different hospitals, during which those hospitals became my home, and the NHS and the doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals that cared for me became my family. Now, in all, I spent 258 days lying in a hospital bed, and that gave me an unthinkable amount of time to think. I saw myself as a victim. Why me? What have I done to deserve this? For me at that time, the mindset of a victim was a safe world for me. I felt entitled to wallow in self-pity, and I sought solace, and if not comfort, from everybody's kindness and their sympathy. But whilst 99% of me wanted to remain in the safe world as a victim, there remained 1% within me, this tiny burning ember, which was terrified by the prospect of giving up, of giving in, and terrified by the prospect of a lifetime defined by my disability. But at that time, I simply didn't have the strength of body, the strength of mind, nor the knowledge to cross that all-important psychological barrier between remaining a victim and actually becoming accountable for how I responded to the tragic hand of cards I'd been dealt. For me, the worst times were the middle of the night. And during those endless hours when I awoke in hospital, I could feel myself slipping into a deeper void. I was becoming more aware of the life that I'd lost, and that this new life of mine was different. This new life was a life trapped in hospitals attached to machines and monitors. I couldn't eat, drink, sleep, talk, or move. This new life was incredibly scary and lonely, and I know that if I'd faced this new life alone, I would have stayed on the wrong side of that barrier, a victim. But I didn't face this new life alone. With the support of my family, my friends, and my NHS family, that helped me propel me across that line. Now, life in hospital was tough, but the catalyst was Nurse Tracy. Nurse Tracy came to me one night in August 2004, 4 months after I got hurt. And she was working the night shift, and she was there for me when I most needed her advice, support, and encouragement. Now, it wasn't what Nurse Tracy did that changed my life. It was how she did it. It wasn't the taking of my vital obs, my temperature, my blood pressure. It was her comforting smile, her listening ear, or the offer of insight into the successful lives of previous patients, which helped to shine a glimmer of hope on this new life of mine. And Nurse Tracy told me about ex-patients of hers that had gone on to successfully rebuild their lives. She signposted me to charities established to help people suffering from spinal cord injury. Nurse Tracy showed me that life with a disability did not mean life confined by disability. Now, Nurse Tracy did not need to do this, but by focusing on how she did it, rather than what she did, it was this smallest gesture which, to me, had the biggest impact. Now, Nurse Tracy told me about previous patients that had gone on to successfully rebuild their lives. But what exactly did that mean for me? There's a cliche in life that there's always somebody worse off than you. But for me, that simply wasn't true. I was in the National Spinal Injury Centre, the biggest spinal unit in the country, and yet I was the only ventilated patient. Put simply, I was the worst of the worst. I had no peer with whom to speak or seek advice or comfort. It was an incredibly scary time, but I knew that if I didn't face up to my challenges then, I never would. Now, rebuilding my life for me at the time was completely unidentifiable. It was a new life to me. I didn't know what this new life brought for me. I knew that if I focused on the destination goal of rebuilding my life, I would fail. I didn't know what it looked like. It was unidentifiable, unquantifiable, unobtainable. I knew that if I focused on this end goal, I'd quickly lose direction because I didn't know what I'd be doing in the next hour, let alone the next day, week, month, year, or in 10 years' time in this new life of mine. But rebuilding my life meant I had to bring it back under my control. I knew that if I focused on the end goal, the end destination, I would fail. And so I broke it down into the smallest of component parts. I created little achievable challenges for myself. Every morning when the nurses brought my medication around, rather than trying to learn what all my tablets did for me all at once, every day I gave myself the task of learning what just one more of my tablets did for me. Every day when I was taken to the spinal gymnasium, when the physios put me on the tilt table, trying to stand me up vertically, I knew that my blood pressure would drop and I would faint if I tried to stand up immediately. So every day, I tried to stand just 1 degree closer to vertical. Now, yes, it did take longer, but by breaking down this unachievable goal into achievable challenges, I brought it back under my control. And slowly but surely, the accumulation of these little wins did combine to help me get my foot on the first rung of the ladder towards rebuilding my life. Now, rebuilding my life has been a matter of conquering my mindset. So many possibilities in life were closed to me that day on the pitch, but so many possibilities remained, and precious few new possibilities were created. In short, I had to focus on the doors that remained opened rather than all the doors that were closed to me on the pitch that day. Now, I want everybody to look at this slide and tell me the first thing that comes into your mind. This is pretty basic maths. 4 times 4 is wrong. Yes. When I was in hospital in the mindset of a victim, I focused on the one thing that was wrong with me: my broken neck, my broken body. But that day when I took the decision to try and maximize my quality of life by becoming accountable for what I made of myself, it quickly became apparent that if I was to maximize what I could do, I had to focus on all the things I could still do, all my qualities that remained, all my strengths. Yes, there is one thing wrong with this slide, but there's 3 things that are correct. Rather than focusing on my broken neck, I choose to focus on my one, which was the fact that my brain was not injured on the pitch that day. I focused on the 4, which was the support of my family, my friends, and my NHS family, which helped propel me across that line between remaining a victim and becoming accountable. And I chose to focus on the 9, which was my own personal willingness to do whatever it took to maximize what I could still achieve in this life of mine. Now, at the start, I asked you to look at my shoes. Now, if I focused on the 15 and the fact that I'm never going to walk a step in these shoes, that would be heartbreaking. But instead, I choose to focus on the positives, and the 1, the 4, and the 9, and the fact that I'm never going to have to buy another pair of shoes again in my life. Now, yes, these shoes were made for walking, but by focusing on all the things that I can still do, focusing on my strengths, I don't just intend to walk this way through life, I intend to walk, jog, run, skip, and dance. So tomorrow morning when you put on your shoes, make a commitment to yourself to focus on all the strengths you bring to any given task, all your qualities, and you won't just walk your way through life, you'll do the salsa, the rumba, and for the more adventurous of you, you will twerk your way through life. Thank you.